He came to the wedding alone. Then the neighbor stood up. "Don't look at the bride. Look at me." He came to the wedding alone. And that fact alone made people whisper before he even reached the entrance. Weddings had a way of exposing absence more loudly than presence. And his empty side felt heavier than any companion he could have brought. His suit was perfectly pressed, his shoes polished. Yet nothing could smooth the quiet tension in his posture. He wasn't late, he wasn't early, he arrived exactly on time. As if punctuality could shield him from the memories that waited inside. The hall glowed with soft lights. Laughter bounced off the walls. And familiar faces turned briefly in his direction before looking away, pretending not to notice the man who once belonged to this story in a different way. Every step he took forward felt like stepping backward into a past he had tried, unsuccessfully, to bury. He took his seat when directed, nodding politely, eyes fixed ahead, refusing to search for the bride. He already knew what he would see if he did confirmation, that a chapter of his life had ended. Without his permission, the air felt thick, not because of the crowd, but because of everything unsaid. People remembered him. Of course they did. They remembered how he used to laugh louder, stand taller, believe harder. Time had changed him, worn him down at the edges. And tonight, he felt like a visitor in a place that once felt like home. He folded his hands together, steadying himself, telling his heart to behave, reminding himself that he was only here because he had been invited. Because saying no would have looked like weakness. Then he felt the subtle shift in the room. The kind that happens when attention moves without announcement. A chair scraped softly behind him. Someone stood up. At first, he didn't turn. Weddings were full of movement, of people rising and sitting, of restless emotions. But this was different. This wasn't nervous excitement or a forgotten toast. This was deliberate. A presence stepped forward, close enough that he could sense it without seeing it, close enough that the space around him tightened. He finally looked, slowly, as if afraid that moving too fast might break whatever fragile control he still had. It was her. The neighbor, the woman he had spent years greeting over fences and hallways, sharing small talk that never felt small, laughter that lingered longer than it should have. She wasn't dressed like the bride, but she wore white, and somehow it suited her more naturally than anyone else in the room. Her posture was steady, confident, as though she had rehearsed this moment in silence for a long time. People noticed now. Conversations paused. Eyes widened. A ripple of confusion moved through the guests, but she didn't hesitate. She leaned in slightly, close enough that only he could hear her voice. Though her presence spoke loudly to everyone, his heart began to race. Not from fear, but from recognition. The kind that hits you when something you denied finally stands in front of you. He had always told himself she was just a neighbor, just a kind face in passing, just a comfort during a difficult time. But comfort, he now realized, had slowly turned into something else, something he had never dared to name. She raised her hand, gently but firmly, lifting his chin so he couldn't look away, so he couldn't hide behind politeness or restraint. Her eyes held his, unwavering, filled with something fierce and honest. "Don't look at the bride," she said quietly. But the words carried weight far beyond their volume. "Look at me." The room seemed to hold its breath. His thoughts scattered, colliding with memories he had locked away late-night conversations. Shared silences, the way she always seemed to know when he was pretending to be fine. He had never crossed a line, never admitted what lingered between them, because timing had always been wrong, because life had always interfered. And now, here she was, standing in the middle of a wedding, rewriting the rules without apology. He searched her face, seeing not impulse, but certainty. This wasn't jealousy or drama. This was truth finally refusing to be quiet. His chest tightened as realization dawned. He hadn't come to witness someone else's beginning. He had come to confront his own unfinished story. The bride remained at the altar, unaware or pretending to be, while the real moment unfolded here, unscripted and raw. He swallowed, struggling to speak, struggling to breathe, aware that every eye in the room was now fixed on them. The neighbor knew the woman didn't release his chin. She waited, giving him something he hadn't had in a long time, a choice made visible. And as he looked into her eyes, the past and present collided, setting the stage for a truth that could no longer be ignored, no matter how much it terrified him. Silence stretched so long that it began to ache. The kind of silence that forces truth to surface, whether you're ready or not. He felt the weight of every stare, yet, strangely, none of them mattered anymore. The only thing that existed was her. Hand under his chin and the steady intensity in her eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what was appropriate, expected, or safe. He was thinking about what was real. His breath came unevenly as he finally spoke. His voice low, rough around the edges, shaped by emotions he had swallowed for far too long. He asked her why now, why here, why she would choose this moment to turn everything upside down. Her answer didn't come immediately. She straightened slightly but didn't step back, as if distance itself would have been a lie. She told him that some moments demand courage more than comfort. That, watching him walk into this room alone, had made something inside her break and rebuild all at once. She had spent years convincing herself that her feelings were harmless, manageable, something she could carry quietly without burdening him. But seeing him sit there, pretending he was fine, pretending he was only a guest to a story he once dreamed of writing, had made it impossible to stay silent. She said she wasn't asking for promises, wasn't demanding declarations in front of everyone, but she refused to let him believe he was alone when he never truly had been. The words hit him harder than any accusation ever could. He realized then that his loneliness hadn't been about absence. It had been about avoidance. He had avoided her eyes, avoided late conversations that lingered too long, avoided the safety he felt around her because it terrified him more than heartbreak. Around them, murmurs grew louder, confusion turning into shock, shock turning into judgment, but he barely registered it. His focus stayed locked on her. On the way, her voice trembled just slightly, revealing the vulnerability beneath her strength. He stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the floor, echoing louder than it should have. Standing brought them eye to eye, equal at last, no longer divided by hesitation. He told her he had always known, deep down, that what they shared was different, that it had scared him because it felt like home. When he no longer trusted himself to stay anywhere, he admitted that coming to this wedding alone wasn't an accident. It was a quiet confession he hadn't known how to voice. Faces in the crowd shifted from curiosity to disbelief as the energy in the room changed, but neither of them looked away. The bride finally noticed the disruption, her smile faltering as she followed the direction of the stairs, confusion flashing across her face. He felt a pang of guilt, not for loving someone else, but for the truth arriving in a place meant for celebration. Yet he also understood that honesty rarely waits for perfect timing. The neighbor's hand dropped from his chin, not because the moment had ended, but because she trusted him now to stay. He reached for her hand instead, his grip firm, grounding. A silent promise that he wasn't running this time. He addressed the room briefly, not with explanations, but with sincerity, acknowledging that life doesn't always follow plans and that sometimes the most important vows are the ones you make to yourself before you can make them to anyone else. Some guests looked away. Uncomfortable, others leaned in, witnessing something raw and undeniably human. The bride stood frozen, processing the collapse of expectations, while he stood fully present for the first time in years. He didn't ask the neighbor to leave with him. He didn't need to. Their connection no longer required dramatic gestures. It existed in the quiet understanding between them, in the shared breath, in the relief of truth spoken aloud. Together, they walked toward the exit, not as a spectacle, but as two people finally aligned with what they felt. The doors closed behind them, muting the noise, leaving only the steady rhythm of their footsteps and the uncertain future ahead. Outside, neither spoke right away. Words would come later. What mattered was that he, no longer felt alone, and she no longer felt invisible. In choosing honesty, they had disrupted a ceremony, but they had also reclaimed something far more sacred: the courage to face love without hiding.